The hall was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Old wooden floors creaked with every step, and the tall ceiling carried echoes from years of music that once filled the space. Dust floated softly in the air when the late evening light slipped through the high windows. This place had seen applause, tears, standing ovations, and forgotten dreams. Tonight, it belonged to one man and his piano. He sat on the bench with relaxed confidence, fingers resting lightly on the keys. This was not a performance night. There was no audience, no pressure, no need to impress anyone. He had played on big stages under bright lights with people watching his every move. Compared to that, this empty hall felt almost boring. He came here often to rehearse, but tonight his mood was different. He felt playful, restless, and slightly tired of being serious all the time. He started playing simple notes, nothing deep or emotional. Just light sounds, teasing melodies, and small musical jokes that danced around the room. The kind of playing that made people smile rather than think. He laughed softly to himself when he added a funny pause or an unexpected sound. Music, to him, was not always about perfection. Sometimes it was just about enjoying the moment. Across the hall, a woman pushed a cleaning cart slowly along the aisle. She moved quietly, almost blending into the background. Her job was simple: clean the floors, wipe the seats, empty the bins, and leave before morning. Most people barely noticed her. To them, she was part of the building like the walls or the lights. She had worked here for a long time, long enough to know the hall's moods and sounds. She stopped for a moment when she heard the playful notes. Her hands rested on the handle of the cart as she listened. The music was light, but her eyes showed focus. She was not just hearing sound. She was listening with attention. The man at the piano did not notice her yet. He was busy entertaining himself, letting his fingers wander freely. He suddenly played an exaggerated, silly tune, stretching it longer than needed, clearly meant to sound humorous. It echoed through the empty hall. This time he glanced around, half expecting a reaction. Most days no one responded. But tonight he heard something different. A quiet sound. Not laughter, not clapping, but a soft breath, almost like a thoughtful hum. He stopped playing. The silence returned, thicker than before. He turned his head and finally noticed the cleaning lady standing still near the aisle. She looked calm, not embarrassed at being seen. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes carried something deeper. Curiosity sparked inside him. "Was that funny enough?" he asked casually, his voice light, almost joking. She paused before answering. "It was playful," she said, "but it felt unfinished." He raised an eyebrow. That was not the answer he expected. Most people would have laughed politely or stayed silent. He smiled, slightly amused. "Unfinished?" he repeated. She nodded slowly, like a sentence without an ending. The man chuckled. "It was meant to be simple. Just a joke." "I know," she replied. "But even jokes have timing." That caught his attention. He turned fully on the bench now, facing her. There was no anger in her voice, no disrespect, just honesty. He studied her for a moment. Her clothes were plain, her posture relaxed from years of physical work. She did not look like someone who would comment on music, let alone critique it. "Do you like music?" he asked. "I do," she said simply. He laughed softly and turned back to the piano. "All right then," he said. "Let's try again." He played another tune. This one even more exaggerated, full of dramatic pauses and unexpected twists. He made it clearly humorous, almost childish. When he finished, he looked back at her with a playful grin, waiting. She smiled faintly this time, but she did not clap. "Better," she said. "But you rushed the middle." He blinked. "Rushed?" "Yes," she replied. "You didn't let the silence breathe." That made him pause. Silence was something musicians talked about often, but rarely with people outside the world of music. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and disbelief. "And how would you know that?" he asked, not unkindly, but with honest surprise. She hesitated for a second, then shrugged. "You hear these things when you listen long enough." The room felt different now. What started as a playful rehearsal was slowly turning into something unexpected. He was no longer bored. He felt alert. He played again, this time adjusting the timing, letting pauses stretch just a bit longer. When he finished, he waited. She nodded. That's it. He exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. You're good at listening, he said. She smiled politely and went back to her cart. I should get back to work, she said. The hall needs to be clean before morning. As she moved away, he stared at the keys in front of him. His playful mood was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of intrigue. He had come here to escape seriousness, to joke with music. Instead, he found himself being challenged by someone he never expected. He played a few more notes, softer this time, more thoughtful. The hall listened. Somewhere behind him, the sound of a mop sliding across the floor matched the rhythm of his playing. Without planning it, the music and the movement began to blend. For the first time that evening, he did not feel alone in the hall. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had something new to learn. The next evening, the hall felt less empty, even before a single note was played. The man arrived earlier than usual, carrying the quiet memory of the previous night with him. He told himself it was just a small moment, nothing important. Still, his steps slowed as he entered, and his eyes moved naturally toward the aisle where the cleaning cart usually appeared. He sat at the piano and touched the keys without playing. For the first time in a long while, he was unsure how to begin. The playful mood from before felt different now. He was aware that someone else might be listening, not just hearing sounds but listening closely. That thought stayed with him. He started with a familiar piece, something safe and well-practiced. The notes flowed smoothly, filling the hall with a steady rhythm. It was clean, precise, and controlled, the kind of playing people expected from him. When he finished, the echo faded gently into silence. A soft sound came from the side of the hall. A cleaning cart rolled into view. She was back. She moved slowly, focused on her work, not looking at him right away. He watched her from the corner of his eye. Part of him wanted to speak, to continue the strange conversation from the night before. Another part of him felt unsure. What if yesterday was just a coincidence? He decided to test it. Instead of starting another serious piece, he played a short, playful melody, light and humorous, almost like a question. The notes bounced around the hall. He paused and waited. The cart stopped. She looked up, her expression calm but attentive. That one sounded like you were asking something, she said. He smiled to himself. Maybe I was. She leaned lightly on the cart. And what was the question? He shrugged. I'm not sure yet. She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Then you should play it again. Sometimes the question becomes clear the second time. That surprised him. He played it again, this time slightly slower. He changed one note, then another. When he finished, he felt something shift inside him. She spoke softly. Now it sounds more honest. He turned fully toward her. You really hear these things, don't you? She smiled faintly. I just listen. He laughed quietly. Most people say that. Yes, she replied. But most people are already thinking about what to say next. That stayed with him. Over the next few days, this became their unspoken routine. He would arrive to rehearse. She would clean quietly in the background. And every now and then, he would play something meant to amuse, to test, or to surprise. Each time, she responded with simple but sharp observations. Never long lectures. Never praise. Just honest words. You rushed the ending. That part needed space. You were thinking too much there. At first, he felt defensive. He had spent years being praised by teachers, critics, and audiences. Who was this woman to correct him? But her words were never harsh. And the more he listened, the more he realized she was right. One evening, he deliberately played a piece poorly, exaggerating mistakes and wrong timing, just to see what she would say. She frowned slightly. Why are you hiding? That question hit harder than any criticism. Hiding? He repeated. Yes, she said. You know how to play better than that. But you're pretending you don't. He stared at the keys. He hadn't expected that. He thought he was being clever, playful. Instead, she saw through him completely. "I just wanted to joke," he said. "Jokes still need truth," she replied. Silence filled the hall again, but this time it felt thoughtful, not awkward. Later that night, he offered her a chair near the piano. "Sit," he said. "If you're going to keep correcting me, you might as well be comfortable." She hesitated. "I'm working." "So am I," he said. She considered it for a moment, then sat. The chair looked small next to the piano, but she sat straight, hands resting calmly in her lap. He played a new piece, slower and more emotional. There was no humor in this one. It came from a deeper place, filled with pauses and soft tension. When he finished, he waited. She took her time before speaking. "You sound tired," she said gently. He let out a slow breath. "I am. Not in your hands," she added. "In your heart." That was not something he expected to hear during rehearsal. "How can you tell?" he asked. "Because you're playing like someone who has already been heard," she said. "Not like someone who still wants to say something." Those words stayed with him long after she returned to her work. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations grew slightly longer, though still simple. He learned she worked nights because the hall was quiet then. She learned he preferred practicing when no one was watching. Neither of them spoke much about their lives outside the hall. One evening, curiosity finally won. "Where did you learn to listen like that?" he asked. She paused, her hand resting on the mop. "A long time ago," she said. "Did you study music?" he pressed. She looked at the floor for a moment. "I used to be around it," she replied. He sensed there was more, but he didn't push. Some truths reveal themselves only when ready. That night, he played with new care. Not to impress, not to joke, but to communicate. Every note felt more personal. He realized he was no longer playing just for himself. As he finished, he heard her quiet voice behind him. That one felt real. He smiled, a genuine one this time. In a hall once filled only with echoes, two strangers had formed a quiet understanding. One played, one listened, and between them something important was beginning to grow. The hall had started to feel like a shared space rather than an empty building. The air no longer felt cold or distant. Each evening carried a quiet expectation, even before the first note was played. The man arrived with less noise now, moving carefully, as if he did not want to disturb something invisible but important. He sat at the piano and closed his eyes before playing. Instead of jumping into sound, he waited. He listened to the hall itself. The faint hum of lights, the distant street noise, the soft echo of footsteps. When he finally pressed the keys, the music came out slower, softer, more thoughtful. From the back of the hall, the woman worked as usual. But tonight, her movements slowed. She felt the change immediately. The music no longer tried to impress. Spoke quietly, like a confession. When he finished, he did not turn around right away. He waited for her voice. "You're remembering something," she said. He turned, surprised. "How do you know?" "Because you weren't performing," she replied. "You were visiting." That word stayed with him. Visiting. Memories had always lived inside him, but he rarely let them into his playing. Tonight they came on their own. He stood and stretched his fingers. "Sit with me for a moment," he said gently. She hesitated, then set her tools aside and walked closer. She did not sit on the chair this time. She stood near the piano, close enough to see the keys clearly. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, keeping his voice calm. "You don't listen like someone who is just passing time. Music means something to you." She looked at the keys, not at him. "It used to." "Used to?" She nodded slowly. "Before life changed direction." He did not rush her. The silence felt respectful, not heavy. "I grew up around music," she continued. "It filled my days. I learned early how sound can hold feeling, how one wrong pause can change everything." He listened closely, afraid to interrupt. "There was a time," she said, "when I thought music would be my whole life." "What happened?" he asked quietly. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Life happened." She told him about years spent practicing, dreaming, believing that effort always leads somewhere. She spoke of small stages, long nights, and sacrifices that never made headlines. Then came responsibilities, family needs, and choices that could not be delayed. Music slowly moved from the center to the background. "I didn't stop loving it," she said. "I just stopped chasing it." He felt a strange tightness in his chest. He had chased music all his life. He never thought about what it would feel like to let it go. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Sometimes," she answered. "But missing something doesn't always mean you want it back the same way." That answer carried wisdom he had never learned from teachers. Over the next evenings, she shared small pieces of her past. Not all at once. Just enough to explain her sharp ear and quiet confidence. She never spoke with regret, only honesty. In return, he found himself opening up too. He talked about the pressure to always be perfect, to meet expectations, to repeat success. He admitted that sometimes, the applause felt empty. She listened without judgment. "You've been heard," she said one night, "but you haven't been understood." That sentence stayed with him longer than any review he had ever received. One evening, he brought a piece he had written years ago but never performed. It was raw and imperfect, filled with pauses that felt uncomfortable. He had hidden it away because it did not sound impressive. He played it for her. Halfway through, his hands trembled. He almost stopped. Then he remembered her words about truth, and he continued. When the last note faded, the hall remained silent. She did not speak right away. Finally, she said, "That's the one you should be playing." He looked at her, confused. "It's unfinished." "So are you," she replied gently. He laughed softly, not out of humor, but relief. From that night on, their roles felt less defined. He was no longer just the performer. She was no longer just the listener. They were two people meeting in the space between sound and silence. Sometimes she suggested small changes. Other times, she simply sat quietly, allowing him to struggle through his own thoughts. Her presence alone made him braver. One night, he asked, "Do you ever wish you had chosen differently?" She thought for a moment. "I wish I had trusted myself more," she said. "But I don't regret surviving." That answer humbled him. As weeks passed, the hall felt warmer. The music grew deeper. What started as humor had turned into something honest and alive. Neither of them knew where this connection would lead, but both felt it clearly. Something that had been silent for a long time was finally speaking again. The days before the performance moved faster than he expected. The hall was booked more often now, filled with technicians, lights being tested, and quiet voices echoing through the space. Still, late at night, the hall returned to its calm state. That was when he felt most himself. He practiced longer hours, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Each note felt heavier, carrying more meaning than before. The playful humor he once relied on no longer felt enough. Something inside him wanted depth, honesty, and risk. She continued her routine, just as steady as ever. The cleaning cart rolled through the aisles, the soft sound becoming part of the music itself. But there was a difference now. They both knew something important was approaching. One night, he stopped playing suddenly. His hands hovered above the keys, unsure. "I don't know if this is right," he said quietly. She paused her work and looked at him. "What feels wrong?" "It sounds perfect," he said. "Too perfect." She nodded. "Perfection can hide fear." He exhaled slowly. "I'm afraid of disappointing people." "Who?" she asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. After a moment he said, "Myself." She walked closer and stood beside the piano. "Then stop playing for the room you imagine," she said. "Play for the truth you know." He looked at her, searching her face. There was no pressure there, only calm certainty. That night he made a choice. He would change the program. Instead of ending with a familiar crowd favorite, he would close with the unfinished piece she believed in. The one he had hidden for years. The decision scared him, but it also made him feel alive. As the performance day approached, doubt tried to creep back in. During rehearsals with staff present, he played carefully, holding back. Applause from empty seats felt hollow. He missed the quiet nights, The night before the performance, the hall was empty again. He arrived late. The lights were dim. Only the stage was softly lit. She was there. "I thought you'd be gone by now," he said. She smiled. "I wanted to hear it one more time." He sat at the piano without speaking. His fingers trembled slightly as he began. He played the full program from start to finish, ending with the piece that still felt exposed and fragile. When the last note faded, he stayed still. "Well?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "You're not hiding anymore," she said. "That's all anyone can ask." He closed his eyes. The tension he had been carrying loosened. The next evening, the hall filled with people. The sound of conversations, footsteps, and excitement replaced the familiar silence. He stood backstage listening to the noise. His heart raced. He searched the crowd from behind the curtain. He saw her. She sat near the back, hands folded, posture calm. She did not wave. She did not smile. She simply met his eyes and nodded once. That was enough. He walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The applause rose and fell. He bowed, sat, and placed his hands on the keys. The first pieces went smoothly. The audience responded warmly. Everything was going as expected. Then came the final piece. A quiet fell over the hall. He took a breath and began. The music was softer than the rest of the program. Slower. It did not try to impress. Spoke gently, honestly, allowing silence to sit between phrases. Every pause felt intentional. He forgot about the audience. He forgot about reviews and expectations. He played as if he were alone in the hall again, with only one person truly listening. Halfway through, emotion rose unexpectedly. His vision blurred for a moment, but his hands did not stop. He let the feeling flow into the sound. When the final note faded, the hall remained silent. For a heartbeat, he feared he had failed. Then applause erupted. Not loud at first, then stronger, deeper. People stood. He rose slowly, stunned. He bowed, his chest tight. From the back of the hall, she stood as well. She did not clap loudly. She simply nodded again, pride clear in her eyes. Later that night, after the hall emptied, he returned to the stage. She was already there, cleaning quietly. "You did it," he said. "You did," she replied. He smiled. "I couldn't have without you." She shook her head. "You always could. You just needed someone to listen." He looked around the empty hall, now filled with echoes of truth instead of noise. For the first time, he understood what brilliance really meant. The days after the performance felt strangely quiet. The applause had faded. The hall returned to its usual calm, and life moved forward as it always did. Yet something inside him had shifted. He woke up with a lighter chest and a clearer mind. Music no longer felt like a role he had to play. It felt like a conversation he wanted to continue. He returned to the hall the following evening, not for rehearsal, but out of habit. The lights were dim, and the seats were empty again. He walked slowly down the aisle, listening to his own footsteps. When he reached the stage, he did not sit at the piano right away. He stood there, remembering how close he came to hiding that final piece forever. From the far side of the hall, the familiar sound of a cart rolling reached him. She was there just like always. "You don't have to work tonight," he said gently. She smiled. "The hall doesn't clean itself." He laughed softly. "I suppose it doesn't." He sat at the piano and played a few simple notes. Nothing planned. Nothing serious. Just sound filling space. She listened while wiping down the seats, her movements slow and steady. After a while, he stopped. "They want me to tour again," he said. She paused. "Do you want to?" He thought carefully before answering. "I want to play," he said. "But I don't want to go back to pretending." She nodded. "Then don't." The simplicity of her answer made him smile. "You make it sound easy." "Easy isn't the same as simple," she replied. "You already know what matters now." He realized she was right. The fear that once controlled his choices had lost its grip. He had played the truth once. He could do it again. Over the next weeks, his playing changed even more. He experimented not to impress but to explore. Sometimes the hall was empty. Sometimes a few staff members lingered to listen. Word spread quietly. People noticed something different in his sound. She continued her work, never asking for credit, never stepping into the spotlight. But her presence remained a steady force. When he doubted himself, she reminded him to listen. When he rushed, she reminded him to breathe. One evening, he asked, "Have you ever thought about playing again?" She stopped and looked at the piano. "Sometimes," she admitted. "You should," he said without hesitation. She smiled, not sadly this time. "Maybe," she said, "but only if it feels right." That answer made him respect her even more. She no longer chased validation. She trusted her own timing. Months passed. Seasons changed. The hall hosted new events, new faces, new sounds. He traveled occasionally, but he always returned. The hall remained his anchor. One quiet night, he placed a second bench beside the piano. "Sit," he said. She hesitated longer than usual, then sat. He moved aside. "Play anything," he said. She shook her head. "It's been a long time." "So has honesty," he replied. "But it comes back." She placed her hands on the keys. First, nothing happened. Then slowly she played. The notes were simple, careful, but full of feeling. The sound filled the hall with something old and familiar, like a memory finally allowed to breathe. He listened. When she finished, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For reminding me," she said. They sat in silence for a long moment. From that night on, the hall carried more than echoes. It carried stories. Stories of talent found in unexpected places. Of listening instead of assuming. Of brilliance that never needed permission to exist. He understood now that humor had brought him here, but honesty had changed him. And brilliance did not always wear fine clothes or stand on bright stages. Sometimes, it pushed a cart quietly through the aisle, listening closely, waiting for the right moment to speak. As the lights dimmed and the hall rested, two people remained connected by something deeper than music. They had both been heard. At last. The days after the performance felt strangely quiet. The applause had faded, the hall returned to its usual calm, and life moved forward as it always did. Yet something inside him had shifted. He woke up with a lighter chest and a clearer mind. Music no longer felt like a role he had to play, felt like a conversation he wanted to continue. He returned to the hall the following evening, not for rehearsal, but out of habit. The lights were dim, and the seats were empty again. He walked slowly down the aisle, listening to his own footsteps. When he reached the stage, he did not sit at the piano right away. He stood there, remembering how close he came to hiding that final piece forever. From the far side of the hall, the familiar sound of a cart rolling reached him. She was there just like always. "You don't have to work tonight," he said gently. She smiled. "The hall doesn't clean itself." He laughed softly. "I suppose it doesn't." He sat at the piano and played a few simple notes. Nothing planned. Nothing serious. Just sound filling space. She listened while wiping down the seats, her movements slow and steady. After a while he stopped. "They want me to tour again," he said. She paused. "Do you want to?" He thought carefully before answering. "I want to play," he said. "But I don't want to go back to pretending." She nodded. "Then don't." The simplicity of her answer made him smile. "You make it sound easy." "Easy isn't the same as simple," she replied. "You already know what matters now." He realized she was right. The fear that once controlled his choices had lost its grip. He had played the truth once. He could do it again. Over the next weeks, his playing changed even more. He experimented not to impress but to explore. Sometimes the hall was empty. Sometimes a few staff members lingered to listen. Word spread quietly. People noticed something different in his sound. She continued her work, never asking for credit, never stepping into the spotlight. But her presence remained a steady force. When he doubted himself, she reminded him to listen. When he rushed, she reminded him to breathe. One evening, he asked, "Have you ever thought about playing again?" She stopped and looked at the piano. Sometimes, she admitted. You should, he said without hesitation. She smiled, not sadly this time. Maybe, she said, but only if it feels right. That answer made him respect her even more. She no longer chased validation. She trusted her own timing. Months passed. Seasons changed. The hall hosted new events, new faces, new sounds. He traveled occasionally, but he always returned. The hall remained his anchor. One quiet night, he placed a second bench beside the piano. Sit, he said. She hesitated longer than usual, then sat. He moved aside. Play anything, he said. She shook her head. It's been a long time. So has honesty, he replied. But it comes back. She placed her hands on the keys. First, nothing happened. Then slowly she played. The notes were simple, careful, but full of feeling. The sound filled the hall with something old and familiar, like a memory finally allowed to breathe. He listened. When she finished, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For reminding me, she said. They sat in silence for a long moment. From that night on, the hall carried more than echoes. It carried stories. Stories of talent found in unexpected places. Of listening instead of assuming. Of brilliance that never needed permission to exist. He understood now that humor had brought him here, but honesty had changed him. And brilliance did not always wear fine clothes or stand on bright stages. Sometimes, it pushed a cart quietly through the aisle, listening closely, waiting for the right moment to speak. As the lights dimmed and the hall rested, two people remained connected by something deeper than music. They had both been heard. At last,